Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of interracial relationships.
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah.
And we've got this really fascinating source. It's called Interracial Marriages and Relationships, Bridging Cultures and Building Understanding.
Okay, yeah.
And, I think it's going to be really interesting to explore, both the joys and the challenges that these relationships bring.
Right.
And, kind of look at how love can transcend racial boundaries.
Yeah.
But also acknowledge that there are still, societal hurdles that people face.
Of course.
So, I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, this source is really interesting because it kind of acknowledges all the different facets, right? So it's not just like, oh, this is all great. It actually acknowledges some of the struggles and the historical context.
Yeah, and I noticed that too, and I thought it was really valuable that they included real life examples.
Yeah, right.
Like the story of David and Mei,
Right.
who he's African American, she's Chinese American, and their families, when they decided to get married, were not happy about it.
That's very common, actually. And it's understandable in a way because, families are coming from their own, cultural frameworks.
Yeah.
And so there could be, a fear of clashes of values or traditions, different ways of raising kids, or even just how the couple is going to be perceived.
Yeah. So how did they deal with that? I mean, did they just ignore their families?
Well, they actually took a very proactive approach to try to bridge the gap.
Oh, wow.
So they really consciously incorporated both of their heritages into their family life. So, for example, family gatherings would include things like soul food
Wow.
alongside traditional Chinese dishes.
Oh.
So it was this really interesting fusion.
It's a really cool metaphor, actually.
Yeah.
Like bringing those two worlds together.
Exactly. And it kind of helped to foster understanding, over time.
Yeah.
Like rather than these differences being dividing lines, it was like, hey, let's experience this together. Let's learn about each other. And that really helped families kind of warm up to each other.
And did they talk about the children at all?
Yeah, they did. They talked about how, children in these families are often exposed to such diverse perspectives from such a young age.
Right.
And that can really foster empathy and adaptability, which are, incredibly important in the world we live in today.
Yeah. But I also imagine there might be some challenges, right? Like how do
Yeah.
they navigate their own identity?
Absolutely. And the source talks about a specific example of a child named Mia.
Okay.
And she was biracial, and, she was facing all these questions from peers who didn't understand what it meant to be biracial.
Right.
And it really highlighted the importance of parents creating that safe space for open conversations about race and identity.
Yeah. Just so they feel comfortable asking those questions
Exactly.
and kind of figuring out who they are in
Yeah.
this world.
And, it's not always sunshine and roses, right? I mean, the source also doesn't shy away from some of the, really harsh realities that these couples face.
Right. And they talked about the incident back in 2017
Yeah.
where there was this couple that was just out in public. They were at a grocery store.
In the U.S., right?
Yeah. And they were harassed simply for being together.
Just because they were an interracial couple.
It's crazy that that still happens today.
Yeah, and that's what's so concerning is that it's not an isolated incident.
Right.
There are stories from all over the world. The source also talks about Jamal and Sarah in the UK.
Okay.
They face discrimination not just from strangers,
Wow.
but also from members of their own family.
Oh, that's got to be hard. You would think that family would be the one place where you would be accepted no matter what.
You would hope so, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the story of Marcus and Fatima in Sweden,
Okay.
who actually faced housing discrimination.
Like they weren't allowed to rent places.
Yeah, and it really highlights, that even in countries that we perceive to be progressive,
Right.
there's still these underlying, biases and racism.
Was it called subtle racism or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Subtle racism, it's not always, overt.
Okay.
It can be these microaggressions or, implicit biases.
I think that's really interesting. Can you explain that a little more? Because I bet our listeners are wondering, what does that actually look like?
Sure. So, it's not as obvious as someone calling you a name or being physically violent towards you.
Right.
It's more like these little things. It could be like a landlord making excuses not to rent to them or
Yeah.
treating them differently than other potential tenants without explicitly saying that it's because they're an interracial couple.
Right.
So it's hard to prove, and it makes people feel really uncomfortable and othered.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's insidious.
It really is insidious.
Yeah, and it takes a toll, on your mental health,
For sure.
on your emotional well-being.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of disheartening, to hear that it's happening even in places like Sweden
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we think of as being, you know, pretty progressive.
Right.
It makes you wonder, like, are things really changing? Are we really moving towards greater acceptance of these relationships?
It's a tough question. The source does point to some data from the Pew Research Center
Okay.
that shows that in the U.S., almost 17% of all new marriages in 2021
Wow.
were interracial or interethnic.
That's a pretty significant number.
Yeah, it is, and that's a big jump, from just a few decades ago.
So does that mean that we're on the right track? Like, is society becoming more inclusive?
Well, it'd be nice to think so, but we also have to remember that, societal change is not always a straight line.
Yeah.
So while those numbers are encouraging, we can't ignore the lived experiences of people who are still facing discrimination.
Right, like what we were talking about with Sarah and Jamal.
Exactly. They're facing racial profiling, even though, statistically, interracial marriage is becoming more common.
So it's like the laws are changing, but people's attitudes aren't necessarily keeping pace.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes those deeply ingrained biases just linger.
So how do we address that? Like, how do we move beyond just surface level acceptance?
Well, the source talks about the power of representation in the media.
Okay.
They mention the movie Black Panther,
Oh, yeah.
which features, a pretty prominent interracial relationship.
Yeah, I remember that. And it was really nice to see it portrayed, in a way that wasn't like a big deal.
That's a good point. It was just normalized, right? Like, it was just part of the
Right.
story.
Yeah.
And that's important because when people see these relationships represented in a positive light,
Yeah.
it can help to challenge stereotypes
Right.
and broaden people's understanding of what love can look like.
But it sounds like they're advocating for more than just including interracial couples in movies and TV shows.
Yeah, they're pushing for more diverse narratives, It's not enough to just have token representation.
Okay.
We need stories that really explore the complexities, the nuances, the different cultural perspectives.
So not just checking a box, but really showcasing the full range of experiences.
Exactly, because these stories can be so powerful, for fostering empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
When people see themselves reflected in the media, it can be really validating.
Yeah,
And when they see experiences that are different from their own, it can really open their minds.
for sure. Okay, so we've talked about societal attitudes, but what about the families themselves? Like, what's it like to raise children in an interracial family?
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect, and the source highlights both the opportunities and the challenges.
Okay, like what kinds of opportunities are there?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that children are exposed to diverse viewpoints and cultural practices from a very young age.
Yeah, I could see how that would make them more open-minded and curious about the world.
Exactly, and in today's globalized society, that's a huge asset.
Right.
They tend to develop a strong sense of empathy and adaptability,
Okay.
which are such important skills.
But what about the challenges? I imagine there could be some unique challenges when it comes to identity.
Yeah, absolutely. The source brings up that example of Mia again. Oh, right. The biracial girl.
Yeah, and she faced a lot of questions from her peers who didn't understand what it meant to be biracial.
Yeah, I bet that was tough for her.
It was, and it really underscores, how important it is for parents to be supportive.
Right. To create that safe space where kids can ask questions and explore their identity.
Exactly, and it's not just about talking about it,
Okay.
It's also about finding communities and activities
Yeah.
that celebrate diversity.
Yeah, where they can connect with other kids who have similar experiences.
Exactly.
So it's like building a support system that extends beyond just the immediate family.
Exactly. And, speaking of support, the source actually outlines 5 key takeaways or lessons
Okay, right.
that are relevant to, anyone really.
Okay, awesome.
So the first one is that open and honest communication is crucial.
Right.
And that's true for any relationship, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
But it's especially important in interracial relationships.
Yeah, because you're dealing with different cultural norms and expectations.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to be willing to have those sometimes difficult conversations, to listen to each other,
Yeah.
to be open to learning and understanding different perspectives.
Okay, what about number 2?
Number 2 is to embrace diversity. And I mean, really embrace it,
Go all in.
Yeah, go all in, celebrate the differences.
So like trying new foods, learning about each other's traditions.
Exactly, incorporating those things into your family life.
Okay.
It's about creating a space where both partners feel valued and respected,
Yeah.
and where their cultural heritage is seen as an asset rather than a source of conflict.
That's a mindset shift, isn't it?
It is. It's about seeing differences as opportunities for growth and connection.
I like that.
So the third lesson is the importance of community support.
Okay.
Finding strength and connection in diverse communities.
Yeah.
It can make a world of difference, for the couple and for their children.
Because it gives them a sense of belonging.
Exactly, a sense of validation,
Yeah.
especially when they're facing challenges. And it can also be a source of knowledge and resources,
Yeah.
connecting with others who've been through similar experiences.
Okay, what's number 4?
Number 4 is about resilience.
Resilience.
Okay. Yeah, because let's face it, interracial couples often face adversity.
Yeah, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, societal prejudice, family disapproval, just the everyday challenges of navigating cultural differences.
Right.
So you have to be resilient. You have to have that strength to persevere.
Yeah. You got to be in it for the long haul.
You do. And the source actually suggests that facing adversity together can strengthen the bond between partners.
Okay.
And it can build resilience within the family as a whole.
So it's like you're facing these challenges as a team.
Exactly. You're a united front and you're not alone in this.
Right.
Okay. Are you ready for number 5?
Yes. Bring it on.
Number 5 is the importance of education and awareness.
Education and awareness. Okay.
Yeah, because we all have a role to play in dismantling stereotypes and promoting understanding.
It's not just about our own personal growth. It's about contributing to a larger societal shift.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions, both big and small, can have a ripple effect.
Okay.
So educate yourself, learn about different cultures, challenge your own biases.
Yeah. Speak up when you see injustice.
Exactly. Because, we can create a world where love truly knows no boundaries.
Wow. It sounds like there's a lot to think about. It's not just about individual relationships. It's about this larger societal context.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these relationships really force us to confront, some of the uncomfortable truths about our society.
Yeah. And it's been inspiring, to hear these stories of couples who are overcoming those challenges.
Yeah, and for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that these relationships are a microcosm of the world we live in. They reflect both the progress we've made and the work that still needs to be done.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
We've seen the beauty of love transcending racial boundaries.
Right.
But we've also seen, the persistence of prejudice and discrimination.
Yeah, exactly. It's a complex picture.
It is. So what about you, listener? How has this deep dive changed your perspective on interracial relationships?
Yeah. What are your takeaways?
Maybe it's inspired you to learn more about a different culture? Or maybe it's made you want to be a more active ally in the fight for racial justice.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, we hope this conversation has left you with a sense of hope.
And a call to action.
Yeah, because even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Having open conversations with friends and family, challenging stereotypes when you encounter them, supporting organizations that are working to promote racial equity.
Those are all great ways to get involved.
Yeah, so let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah.
This deep dive might be over, but there's so much more to explore.
Yeah.
So keep learning, keep engaging with diverse perspectives, and keep using your voice to advocate for a more inclusive and loving world.
A